Hello, and welcome to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science, where we're going to take a look at the kind of controversy that came out about the second and third week of January 2022. It's been going on for a while, but it came to a head kind of earlier this week, and that concept is going to be 5G cell phone technology and airline safety. So, as I said, taking a look at the news accounts, the web pages, listening to the evening news and morning news, this week there have been a lot of fears that 5G cell phone technology is going to interfere with airline safety. So what is going on? You can go back to this Forbes article, not Forbes, this Brookings article on the left here. Will 5G cause airplanes to fall out of sky? I don't know, but that sounds kind of serious. If we've got some type of technology that's going to cause airplanes to crash, is that a technology that we need to be using? From earlier this week, Reuters, AP, just a couple examples. Major U.S. airlines warned 5G could ground some planes, wreak havoc. AP from earlier this week, airlines cancel some flights after reduced 5G rollout in the U.S. So lots of fears, lots of actions being taken by the airlines in an effort to try to kind of maintain flyer safety, airline safety. And so what's going to be going on? And so, and we're going to understand that. We need to understand a little bit about the science that's going to be involved. All of us, actually I don't have my cell phone with me right now, it's sitting over on my desk. Most of us have cell phones that we use without really thinking about it. And so what we can see is that cell phone service, your ability to, walk away from your house, walk away from, pretty much anything where you would be kind of anchoring your phone. And I guess I'm old enough that I remember when phones used to be attached to the wall. And that's the only way that you could get, phone service is, kind of wired, but now we've got cell phones and wireless service. But we really don't think about what's going on that allows us to have that. But basically, cell phone service and visible light are part of what's referred to as the electromagnetic spectrum. And so this is basically kind of a series of energy waves that are present kind of around us, even though we don't think about it, that we don't really realize it. Now we're able to, kind of perceive, we can sense kind of a small portion of this electromagnetic spectrum, kind of illustrated here on the slide in that visible light range. In that we can see, kind of from the reds through the oranges, the yellows, the greens, the blues, the indigos, the violets, we can see these colors that are going to be present. But there are going to be other wavelengths of light, there's going to be other wavelengths of this electromagnetic spectrum that we're not going to be able to perceive with the sensory structures within our eyes. Now, other animals, honeybees, for instance, are able to see, in different wavelengths than what we're able to see. So they're able to perceive the world differently than what we are. We go kind of off to the right-hand side of the slide, we see kind of high energy electromagnetic waves, and we can see things like x-rays. And so if you break a bone, you go into an urgent care center or a hospital emergency room, and they'll take an x-ray. They'll bombard your body with some of these electromagnetic waves, and they'll basically kind of take a shadow from that and be able to look at the density of the bone and see if you have any breaks. We've also, many of us, I grew up again with, a radio because I lived out in the country. And so, I would have a little transistor radio that would, play songs, that would play, kind of music, or I could listen to people speaking. Oftentimes people, used to do that in the cars before they had cell phones and Sirius radio and all of those different kind of internet services providing us with music. So we're exposed to, or at least thinking about, some aspects of this electromagnetic spectrum. Microwaves kind of closer to those radio waves. We don't think about it, but many of us use a microwave to heat up or warm up a meal at some point in the day. But what we can see is that the cell phone service is still using these energetic waves, these waves of energy, to carry those signals, like the radio waves that we would use for a transistor radio. And so what we've got, kind of an example of a 5G tower, showing us that it's kind of midway between the radio waves and the microwaves. So it's part of this kind of spectrum, part of this kind of kind of range of waves of energy that we can use, but are present in the world around us. Now, that's the technology. But now we take a look at what's going on with mobile phones. And you listen to the commercials. We now have 5G being launched. It was originally deployed, about 7 years ago now, I guess. People are talking about, I got a 5G phone. But what does that mean? And basically, the G number corresponds to different levels of mobile phone technology. So in the beginning, even though it wasn't called 1G at the time, but those first mobile phones, which were analog only, that were basically like a cassette tape, or basically like a wired phone, but they're not wired. Was deployed originally in the mid 1980s, but it was relatively slow, 2 kilobytes per second, incredibly slow when we think about what's available today. Over the last 40 years or so, we've seen improvements in technology. 2G added digital voice and text messaging so that we can text one another. 3G coming out in 2002 gave us higher quality audio, video, and data that could be streamed to our phone. And so we could start to listen to music. And at that point, instead of 2 kilobytes per second that was going on in that original cell phone, we're up to 2 megabytes per second. And so basically 1,000 times more information being conveyed per second on our phones. 4G gave us HD streaming. So if you take a look at Netflix, or you subscribe to ESPN, you can look at things and it looks pretty crisp. But now we get to 5G. And so with 5G, we're looking at much, much faster speeds. Instead of megabytes, which are like 1,000 pieces of information, we're looking at gigabytes. And gigabytes is basically 1 billion pieces of information being transmitted per second. And with the full 5G technology being close to a 5G tower, we can be getting 10 to 100 gigabytes per second on these 5G phones. And so, we're a data-driven society. We want access to news. We want access to our audio and our video. And for many people, we want access to our social media. And we want that when we want it. We want it to come very fast. And so these improvements in technology to give us faster delivery of the information, crisper delivery of that information is desired. People want to have things, getting to them very, very quickly. So what is going to be going on? And so we need to take a step back for a moment and look at what is going to be the controversy. What is the science behind the controversy? In order to be able to understand that, we need to understand a little bit about this concept of echolocation. Now, we're looking at a bat here within this diagram. And so the bat is flying along. It's going to give a call, and that's these little kind of orange or brownish kind of waves of sound that are going out. That kind of hits an object. It's going to bounce back. And then because, I'm going to put my pointer down, because of the bat flying kind of forward towards this object that's kind of off to the side, it's going to hit, it's going to echo back, but it's going to come closer or to arrive to this ear because this ear is closer to the object, then it's going to get to the other ear. And so the bats have evolved this ability to be able to kind of hear these signals coming back, these echoes bouncing off of objects, hear the difference between when it reaches the left ear versus the right ear, and be able to determine where things are in space. And so, if you're walking around in the evening, you've got these bats kind of flying around, and they come straight for you, and then at the last minute they veer off because they have a pretty good idea where you're going to be located because of this concept of echolocation. Now, our airplanes aren't flying around like bats, but they're using a similar technology. Airplanes use something called a radio altimeter. This is basically a kind of scientific, technological kind of variation of this ability to use this echolocation. So what happens is an airplane, normally under 5,000 feet, so relatively low in a flight. So this would be when an airplane is landing or when an airplane is taking off. It is going to have kind of a transmitter, like the bat sending off that sound. It is going to be going down towards the ground. It is going to kind of hit the ground. It's going to reflect back. And there are going to be sensors on the belly of the plane that are going to be able to kind of measure the information that's coming back, that echo wave, that reflected wave coming back, and use that to determine how high the altitude that the plane is, how far it is above the ground. Now keep in mind that in most cases, hopefully all cases, airplanes have multiple systems, and so they have an air pressure system as well, but that air pressure system is subject to kind of changes in weather. So basically what's going to be going on, kind of using my camera here as a position, if this is sending a signal towards me, if it was one of these radio altimeters, you would have kind of a mirror kind of in this position. It would come in, it would bounce back, and you would be able, in this case, you can see the camera on my podium here in my home office. So that's telling us where we are in space, where we are kind of above the ground as we're flying along. So what is the controversy? When we take a look at it, the statement that we're looking at is that some airplane altimeters, these radio altimeters, are using a wavelength of this electromagnetic spectrum that it is in a pretty similar frequency to 5G. And so what's going to happen is that same airplane is going to be flying along, but then as it's coming down for landing or as it's taking off, if it goes in close proximity to one of these 5G towers, we're going to have the situation that the 5G kind of the transmission of cell signal for our phones is going to be going up, and it's almost like you're going to be in a situation here where we can't really see what's going on because we've got this 5G technology, like my flashlight here, which is going to be present and interfering with the ability of that sensor on the plane to measure where the plane is kind of above the ground. Now, there have been lots of talk about, why can this happen? Why can Europe roll out 5G technology, but we've got all of these concerns within the United States? What happens is that in Europe, these radio altimeters and the 5G kind of transmission frequencies, the amount of energy, if you want to think about it, that's being transmitted, have been separated a little bit. And so the radio waves are going to be in kind of the cell phone waves are going to be in kind of one range, and the radio altimeters are kind of separated from that a little bit. And so we get less of that interference that's going to be going on. And so how is it that we're going to be able to resolve this? And according to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they've been able to certify as of Thursday of this week, January 20th, I think, about 78% of the U.S. commercial fleet has a radio altimeter that has been cleared to work near a 5G tower. Basically meaning that it's been modified in some way, or at least it isn't close to that frequency that would be interfered with by the transmission from these 5G towers. And so if we're taking a look at this, this gives rise to some of these ethical dilemmas. And keep in mind that, I'm not saying that we should, throw away these concepts of airline safety. I'm not saying that we should throw out cell phone technology. We should be able to come up with a solution. But then the question is, one of these ethical dilemmas, should the inconvenience of a few airline passengers delay the deployment of improved cell phone technology for many more consumers? And so basically looking at this, does the impact on a few individuals change the kind of rollout for many, many more people? And the statistics I'm using for this are from a Gallup poll from earlier 2 weeks ago, maybe earlier in 2022, saying that only about 35 to 45% of people fly in any given year. But what you can see is that pretty much lots of people have cell phones. Many, many more people than fly are going to have cell phones, and they're going to want to get their social media feed to them relatively quickly. They want to get their email. They want to get their text. They want to get their high quality video delivered to their phone. There are ways in which we can kind of roll out 5G and still maintain airline safety, but it's going to take a little bit of work. And so what should we be doing to think about this? Should we delay the launch of the 5G? Should we force the airlines to move to kind of a safer radio altimeter much, much faster? And again, keep in mind, but at this point, about 80% of the commercial fleet is able to do this because they have a radio altimeter that is operating in a wavelength that's not going to be interfered with by this 5G technology. The second ethical dilemma, the last ethical dilemma I want to kind of introduce here, is who should make these final decisions regarding the use of these types of signals. We've got the Federal Aviation Administration that is responsible for flight safety and kind of maintaining basically safety, but maintaining the kind of flights, maintaining commercial flights, maintaining the ability, to deliver people and packages kind of around the United States and around the world. We also have the Federal Communications Commission, and this is the agency within the United States government that is responsible for managing like the radio waves, and because of that, they also manage the waves, the energy waves that are associated with the cell phone technology. In addition to, even though it's not radio waves, televisions are going to be operating on a similar principle as well. And so who should be making these final decisions on who gets to use these types of signals? What criteria should they be using? These are all things that we need to think about. And the controversy came about because the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, was using a wavelength, but the Federal Communications Commission basically licensed that wavelength to cell phone providers. Now keep in mind that at this point, we're in the weekend after all of this happens, the crisis is over, and I say for now, because what's going to happen next. We've got a slight pause in the launch of the 5G technology in a few airports where the towers would potentially the cell phone towers, the 5G towers would interfere with the approach path of an airport. So we've got a slight delay in that process to give the airlines time to kind of adjust their radio altimeters or replace their radio altimeters so that they can fly safely. And so at this point, at least, we've got the government, the FAA, the FCC, that are working together to find a solution for that. And so CNN Politics talks about this as an example of government working, even though the two agencies not necessarily communicating as well with one another, or what generated this situation. So for now, again, CNN Business from Friday of this week, the 5G doomsday scenario is over. But this doesn't mean that something like this is not going to happen again. So we need to think about how is it we're going to move forward with improving the technologies that are available to us without interfering with operations of other important kind of professions, other important, in this case, the airline industry, and allow everybody to be safe and get what they need. So thank you for listening to this Ethical Dilemma in Science. I'm going to post some links below the video if you're interested in receiving additional information. So thank you and have a great day.